Hello, I'm Robin and welcome to Bookspin, and today I'd like to talk about this book, Howard Who by Howard Waldrop. It's a short story collection published in 1986. This is an author who was best known for his short stories, but he never really became like a big household name within the genre, which I guess is why he chose this title for this book. But nevertheless, he did get something of a reputation as a cult author for his short stories. And he picked up some pretty prestigious awards, including the Nebula and the Locus and the World Fantasy Award. I think one of the reasons he's kind of under the radar is he didn't really do much in the way of novels, which is often how authors gain their reputation. He did write one novel, Them Bones, which I read recently and I really enjoyed and I talked about in my recent time travel trio. But it's his short stories that he's best known for. And that's why I chose this book for Short Sci-Fi September. This was his first collection to be published. So there are 12 stories in here, and they were all originally published in magazines in the 70s and 80s, and they're very diverse in theme and style. There are elements of sci-fi in here, for sure, but there's also a fair amount of crossover into other genres like fantasy, historical fiction, mystery and horror. And the stories often have a satirical or humorous bent. There are some really inventive and oddball ideas and premises in here within these stories. And I can see how he's a bit of a cult author. Unfortunately, no, that wasn't really enough to maintain my interest. A lot of these stories fell flat for me. And I'm not really sure what it is because they are well written, but I think there wasn't really enough of an SF focused for my tastes. A lot of these stories, they're quite sort of character focused stories, which is not a bad thing. I mean, he is a character focused author, but it can have its limits in the short story format, I think. These stories left me wanting more in the way of world building, plotting, and especially exploring sci-fi concepts, which is a medium I think short stories can be very good at. So I felt like overall these stories didn't really achieve that. They were entertaining though, on the whole. They're just not really what I was looking for in a short story collection. Most of these stories were sort of 2 or 3 star reads. But that said, there were some stories that I enjoyed, and there were 3 that stood out in particular. So I'm going to briefly mention those so you can get a flavour of the good stuff. The first story in this collection is called The Ugly Chickens. And this is probably Waldrop's best known story. It's an alternate history. It's a tale about the dodo, which possibly isn't extinct after all. And an ornithologist's attempts to track down a lead to this animal. So that's the basic premise. It's written in quite a humorous style. This one won the Nebula Award, and it's quite a quirky and entertaining little tale. It's worth checking out. You can read it online if you want to, if you're interested. This one wasn't my favourite though, but it's a good opener to the collection. I'd say my favourite was another story called Dr. Hudson's Secret Gorilla, and this is a mad scientist tale, which is one of my favourite tropes in science fiction, as I've discussed before on this channel. This story is narrated from the point of view of a man turned gorilla. So he is the result of an experiment when a man dies and he has his brain transplanted into a gorilla against his will. So it's got a kind of B-movie horror premise to it, but this is a very dark and disturbing tale that is surprisingly moving. It's a 4-star story, I would say. I did enjoy that one. Finally, I'd like to mention the last story in the volume, which is called Heirs of the Perisphere. This one surprised me a little, as it's not one I went into expecting to like. This is one that on the book blurb refers to robotic cartoon ducks, which as a story pitch is not exactly music to my ears, but it was a strangely compelling piece with definite service model vibes. It's basically a story about 3 Disney-esque robots designed to work in a theme park who wake up and activate to find themselves in a post-apocalyptic landscape long after civilization has collapsed. So they go on a quest to find out what has happened to the world, what has happened to humanity, and discover their purpose, the robot's new purpose in this world. So it's a pretty neat little story to end the collection with. So those are the stories that I found most memorable and entertaining. There were a few good moments in the other stories, some interesting ideas, but nothing that really stuck the landing. So overall, it's hard for me to give this book a glowing recommendation. I certainly didn't enjoy... I didn't enjoy it as much as Them Bones. I don't regret reading it, though. If only for those 3 stories I mentioned. So I give Howard Who 2.5 stars. Check it out. You might enjoy it more than I did. It's certainly very popular on Goodreads. Okay, so my next review will be S.P. Divya and her collection Contingency Plans for the Apocalypse. I've just started this book and I'm really enjoying it so far. So review coming soon. Thanks for watching and I'll see you again soon.